Hello and welcome back to the Near Mint Gideon YouTube channel. I'm Minty, also known as Near Mint Gideon, and today we're talking about the top 5 green cards that I have been playing more of this year. This is the final episode in my series on top 5 cards for each colour, and we've left the hardest one till last, just because green is so inherently powerful, but more on that later. Again, I'm doing a good stuff edition just because people seem to respond to that better. So it's got no particular theme this episode, just good cards that I have been running a little bit more of recently. So let's get straight into the list. Card number 1 on my list is Balaged Recovery. It's an MDFC, or a modal dual-faced flip card. It's a flip card, so it's a spell on one side and a land on the other, and it's 3 mana, and it just says return a card from your graveyard to your hand. So it's a little bit of recursion in green. There's loads of effects that do this in green. I just really like this one in particular because it's also a land. So you can see some on screen now. Wildest Dreams, Green Warden of Marassa, and Skullwinder all do the same thing. They sort of do this Eternal Witness impression. It's incredibly powerful in singleton formats to reuse effects that you've already used in the past, because obviously in singleton formats you're only ever meant to use an effect once because you've only got one copy of it in your deck. However, with something like a Balaged Recovery, you can return any card from your graveyard to your hand and use its effect again. So that's just very, very powerful. You'll always be happy to see Balaged Recovery because in the early game, it's a land drop, fine, and in the late game, you can return one of your really powerful, very impactful spells from the graveyard and play it again. So, Balaged Recovery, if you haven't got a copy, maybe pick one up. The next card on my list is Garruk's Uprising. Again, there's loads of effects similar to Garruk's Uprising, but I think this is the best of the bunch. It says, when Garruk's Uprising enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you draw a card. Creatures you control have trample. And also, whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. So, I don't know why they printed the creatures you control have trample on it, or I don't know why it needs to draw you a card when it enters the battlefield as well, but hey, it's a green card, so it does everything, and it needs to have like 18 lines of text. But this one's incredibly powerful. The fact that it's when a creature enters the battlefield is really powerful as well, not just cast. So it means that if you're running like a flicker style effect or a blink deck, or you have something that doubles up enter the battlefield effects like a Panharmonicon, you can get 2 triggers instead of 1 from every 4 power creature, or 4 power or greater creature. And it just means you can draw a ton of cards. Effects like this are incredibly good in green and will mean that you draw a metric ton of cards. So that's why Garruk's Uprising makes the list. Also, the trample is really good as well, because I did joke about it a minute ago, but it actually it is impactful in the game, right? You have a lot of big creatures in green, and sometimes you just need to push through some damage, so having that trample is really nice. You play it for the card draw, but the trample is a really good upside. Card number 3 on my list is a land tutor, so it chooses for a land and puts it directly onto the battlefield, and that is Ovenwald Hydra. So it's a 6 mana Hydra. It has reach, more on that later. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control, and also when it enters the battlefield, as I said before, you can search your library for a land card, and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. So this fetches out Field of the Dead, or fetches out any land you can think of. Thespian Stage, Dark Depths, Maze of Ith, whatever. There's so many utility lands, and green has access to these land tutors, so you might want to run some utility lands, and if you're, struggling for land tutors, maybe a Ovenwald Hydra makes it into your deck too. The reach is really sneaky on this card, and it can mean that big flyers just don't bother coming at you, because Ovenwald Hydra is just huge, usually. He's at least a 6/6 when he comes in, and he gets a land, so he's a 7/7. And a 7/7 reach will usually ward off quite a lot of flyers, or any attackers really. He's a very, very good defensive card. I don't know why I said he. I don't know why I'm gendering this Hydra. Anyway, moving on. Run Ovenwald Hydra. It's a good card. Card number 4 is a little bit of removal in green, and it's creature removal. So green is usually quite good at removing non-creature permanents, and, well, I say that it's not very good at moving creatures, but it has lots of fight spells, and this one is a fight spell. So this is Apex Altasaur. It's 9 mana, and when it comes in, it fights up to one target creature you don't control, and when it's dealt damage, it fights a creature. So what happens is it enters the battlefield, it fights something, it's dealt damage, and then it fights something else, and then it's dealt damage and it fights something else, and it fights until it dies, well, or until you choose not to fight it anymore. So it can remove one creature, or it can move 10 creatures, or however many creatures that you potentially need removing. In certain conditions, this is just a board wipe, but a lot of the time it's just a really good removal spell for creatures, which sometimes green struggles with. It's got a lot of these fight spells now, so it tends to have a better time dealing with them. But if you're wanting a sort of pseudo board wipe in your mono green deck, then maybe consider Apex Altasaur as a contender. Card number 5. It's time to be hip and cool again. It's a card from Commander Legends. Is Commander Legends still hip and cool? Maybe, who knows. It's called Magus of the Order. It's a 4-mana human wizard, and it's basically Natural Order, which is a green card, and it says sacrifice another green creature, and then you can search your library for a green creature and put it into the battlefield. So Natural Order is an incredibly powerful card, and Magus of the Order is just a slightly worse version of it, because you have to untap with it. Giving this thing haste would be really good, but sacrificing any green creature and putting another green creature into play is incredibly powerful. You could put a Crater Hoof Behemoth into play, you could put an Apex Altasaur into play. You basically tutor for the answer that you need at the time that you need it and put it into play. You can also do it at instant speed if you've untapped with Magus of the Order, if that helps, which it does in some cases, because you could, sack a token or whatever, sacrifice the Magus, and then go find a big creature at your opponent's end step, and then it'll have like pseudo haste because on your turn it'll not be summoning sick. So that's inherently powerful. Tutoring for a card that you need is really good, and cheating the mana cost by putting it directly into play is incredibly powerful too. Right, those are all the cards. You're probably wondering, why is this video a little bit longer then, if you've mentioned all the cards already? And that's because I want to talk a little bit about green as a colour. And I find myself stop playing green, really, because it's just ridiculous. I've mentioned 5 cards here, and I don't even think they're the best 5 cards in green. I think they're cards that not many people are running, or potentially people haven't heard of, or don't know the benefits of, but they're definitely not the best cards in green. And in fact, the effects that they represent are so abundant in green, and that's part of the reason why it's so powerful of a colour. So if we just go from left to right, so Balaged Recovery, it's Recursion, Garruk's Uprising, Card Draw, Uvenwald Hydra, both tutoring and ramp, Apex Altasaur, removal, and then Magus of the Order, tutoring and cheating mana cost. All of those 5 things are incredibly powerful effects, and green has them in spades. I mentioned for Balaged Recovery that there's a few different options you could run. I mentioned for Garruk's Uprising there's a few different options you could run. I mentioned for Apex Altasaur that it's not necessarily so good at dealing with creatures, but non-creature permanents. There's loads of cards that green can use as removal. Very good at dealing with non-creature permanents. And then finally, Magus of the Order, which is a tutor effect and cheating mana costs. And green does this a lot. I can name a few cards just off the top of my head that do it, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is those 5 concepts are basically the key to any good deck, and green is either the best at them, something like card draw. It's better than blue now, so it's the best at card draw, and land ramp and land tutoring, it's the best at that as well. And because it's so good at ramp and card draw, it means that even if it's got inefficient removal spells like an Apex Altasaur, it doesn't matter, because you've got so much ramp, so many options. It really doesn't matter that you're being a little inefficient with your mana, because you have so much of it. So that's the crux of the issue with green, and why I've stopped playing it, is because it's just become a little boring for me. It's like you can do everything that every other colour can do, and you can do it almost as well as the colours that's meant to do it, but because you have so much mana, you do it as well as the colours that are meant to do it. I hear a lot of call in the community to make white stronger. However, I'm hesitant to make any colour as strong as green, because green does it all. If every colour did it all, then we wouldn't have a colour pie anymore. It would just be really blurred where the lines were. Green does it all, and I don't think every colour should do it all. Anyway, I'm going to have to edit that together because that was a mess of a conversation. So there's my little rant and also my 5 cards for green. I did think about making a joke of just having 5 forests and being like, these forests allow you to cast any green spell, and then just leaving it there and having it like a 4 episode setup for the joke that green is the best. But let me know what you think of my 5 cards in the comment section down below. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comment section down below. If you like the video, make sure you like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I've been Minty, also known as Gideon, and I'll see you in the next one.